Hey friends, and welcome back to the CyberSnap YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about some of my favorite new Tarkir Dragonstorm cards. Um, Usually in these videos I like to talk about evaluating cards from the perspective of a commander player, so that's what we're going to continue to do today. Some of these cards I might mention some of their applications in other formats, but given that casual commander is my area of expertise, that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. You may notice I am in the great outdoors as I'm recording this, just experimenting with some new venues as I record these videos. It's really nice outside for the first time in a while, so I kind of wanted to get some sunshine while I was doing this. You may also hear that my neighbors are doing construction, so if you get the sound of hammering or power tools or planes flying over by, or just the lovely nature ambience of birds chirping, it's just going to come along with the way that we're recording this video, so I apologize in advance. All of that being said, thanks again for being here, and let's just get into it. Oh, I guess one other thing that I'll say is I try and make these sort of like a top 10 list. In this case, I have sort of a full category of cards as one of the entries, so I'm cheating a little bit, but I think that they're close enough in concept that I'm just going to kind of categorize them all together as my number one. And then one other caveat before we get into the actual list here is just that in general, try to pick cards that maybe aren't being talked about as much by other Magic content creators, or just that haven't gotten quite as much buzz, so that, somebody's got to talk about them. There are going to still be popular cards on this list, but if you don't see, like, spoiler alert, if you don't see Mox Jasper, for example, on this list, I do think that card is very strong. It's been talked about enough. So, all right, all that being said, let's go ahead and get into my first entry here on the list. This first entry, as I mentioned, is sort of a category of cards, and that category is omens and the dragons that bring said omens along with them. So, if you haven't seen an omen card before, basically the way that this works, it kind of looks like an adventure card, but it is significantly different. So, the way that it works is there's two spells on the card. One side of it is an omen, and the other side is a creature dragon. So with the omen, in this example, Twin Maw Storm Brood. The omen is an ability called Charring Bite that you can pay 1 and a red for a sorcery that deals 5 damage to target creature without flying. And then the catch for omens is once you do that part of the card, then you shuffle this back into your library. So unlike adventure, it doesn't go into exile. You don't get to just immediately cast the second part of it later. You have to kind of find it again later. So in that way, it is a little bit worse than adventure cards, but I do really like this ability, and I think there's a lot of potential for fun things that you can do with this ability. And I think they've balanced it well by making both sides of these cards stronger in general than what adventure cards typically do. So that first piece that we read is just a 2 mana, 5 damage to any non-flying creature. That's a great removal spell. It's going to kill most things. And I haven't even read the dragon part, so let me read that for you too. It is a 5 and 1 whites for 6 mana, 5/4 flying dragon, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life. Yeah, that part is probably not always going to be as useful as the Charring Bite ability on this card. But here's the neat thing about omens. You don't ever have to cast the dragon side of this. If you're low on life, if you need a body either to block with or to start applying pressure with, you can absolutely cast this for 6 mana and get a big dragon. But if you want to, you can just use this as a 2 mana kill spell that shuffles itself back into your library, and then eventually find it later in the game and still just cast the Charring Bite side of it. You can continually cast the omen part of this spell over and over again for as long as you need a 2 mana removal spell, which, spoiler alert, in most commander games, you're going to need, in many scenarios, you're going to need a 2 mana kill spell. So I really love the utility of this card. I love that it's just a 2 mana kill spell that you can use over and over and over again. And that's sort of like the theme with these omens. I think that almost all of the omen cards that we saw in this set are very strong, for that reason that both sides of them generally are desirable abilities, but the fact that you can reuse them over and over again makes it really appealing to me. I hear a lot of talk about like people's removal packages and how many removal spells you should run in your deck. And I'm not saying that this can like offset how many removal spells that you're running, but being able to have one that you can use and then find again later in the game and potentially find a third time even later in the game is very appealing to me. So I'm going to be looking at trying this in the decks that I have that are in the requisite colors of Boros here. I think it's really neat. I think it does um, some powerful stuff, and I think that that's just sort of my general consensus on a lot of these Omen cards. So this is the first card I wanted to pick of the Omen Dragons. I have a couple more that I want to look at, and we'll just consider these all entry one on the list. So the another Omen Dragon that I want to look at is Scavenger Regent. So the Omen side of this is Exude Toxin, which is 2 black and X for a sorcery that says each non-dragon creature gets -X until end of turn. And then, as with all omens, when you cast that side of it, this shuffles itself back into your deck. The dragon side of this card is a 4 mana 4/4 flyer that has ward discard a card, which is kind of sick. Like, I know that just like a 4 mana 4/4 beater is not that appealing, but like eventually, if you're just attacking with this thing, that is going to add up against your opponent's life total. And if they want to remove it, ward discard a card is actually so strong. There was a card that was popular in Standard. I'm not going to be able to remember the name. It was like a werewolf card from like last Standard that saw a ton of play just because of that ward discard a card ability. Like, if you want to kill it, you have to use your kill spell and then also discard another card. So essentially, anyone using any kind of removal ability or removal card against this is 2-for-1ing themselves and going way down on card advantage, especially when considering the card advantage is relative to 3 other opponents at the table in a game of Commander. So most of the time, people are not going to kill this thing with a kill spell. Yeah, it'll probably get swept up in a board wipe eventually, but I like the dragon side of this. But yeah, I mean, that being said, the Exude Toxin is really the exciting piece about this card. And as with all of these Omen abilities, the fact that you can just use it multiple times in a game is really sweet. 2 mana and X to like give all creatures -X isn't the most efficient rate for a board wipe. But the fact that it comes with all of this other stuff, the fact that you can use it multiple times, it kind of makes me think of Black Sun's Zenith a little bit, which is a card that costs 3 black and X. Zenith is better in the sense that it puts -1/-1 counters, so it's like a permanent reduction of power toughness to all creatures. But yeah, the Zenith also shuffles itself in, and that's like a desirable piece of that card. So yeah, I think that there's just a whole lot of really great stuff happening with this thing. And the fact that you can just run it as a board wipe slot in your deck, but have so many other uses for it, or at least repeated uses for it. Like, I have a few decks where and you know, you could blame the deck builder, but you can only find so many slots for board wipes in a deck, and you don't want to run too many in general because it just drags games out forever anyways. But yeah, I have a few decks where I only have a couple of board wipes in them, and if I ever find myself in a scenario where I'm like, oh man, I need a board wipe right now because my opponents are going off, but I already used all the board wipes in my deck, I've definitely found myself in that scenario a lot of times. So I really like this card for that as well. It's like, it's always going to be in there for you if you do need it. You just got to go digging for it. And then the last Omen Dragon that I want to talk about, again, I think almost all of these Omen Dragons are very powerful and worth considering playing. But the last one that I want to talk about today is Bloomvine Regent. And for fairly obvious reasons, I would say. This one is, we'll say the dragon side first. It's a 5 mana 4/5 flying dragon that says whenever you this creature or another dragon you control enters, you gain 3 life. Like, okay, it's, it's a nice body. It gains you some life. It's nothing too exciting, but the The Omen side of this is almost just cultivate. Commander staple cultivate. This is uh, 2 generic and a green, a 3 mana sorcery for an Omen that says search your library for up to 2 basic forest cards, reveal them, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, and then shuffle. Um, so it's not quite cultivate, it's not quite Kodama's Reach. You are restricted to only getting basic forest cards. So you're not going to be mana fixing yourself with this and getting the other colors that you might, need to find in a deck that has a lot of colors. But like in any mono green deck, this is amazing. In any like 2-color deck that's running green, I think that this is worth. Basically, I'll say if you're in a low color count deck that includes green, and you're interested in playing Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, because your curve is such that ramping on 3 is helpful for you. Like maybe if you have a 5 mana commander, you want to ramp on turn 3 so you can cast your 5 mana commander on turn 4. In that case, you probably want to run Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, and I would just say, like, why not run this card? This card is so good. Like, I would say even in addition to those cards, because at the very worst, you're like, all right, I already have all the mana, I don't need to ramp anymore, which, a green mage would say that never happens, but in the case that you don't need your Kodama's Reach or your Cultivate effect anymore, you can just cast this as a dragon, and then you have a dragon that can attack or block for you. So yeah, there's very little downside to running this card, and if you're in a deck that doesn't have a lot of colors, like again, it's just mono green or 2 colors, and you don't want to run any more Cultivate or Kodama's Reach abilities, I would even consider cutting Cultivate or Kodama's Reach for this card. Just because of the flexibility, because you can cast that ramp side multiple times if you find it multiple times in games. And something that's kind of subtly cool about this is that you are pulling 2 cards out of your deck when you cast it. So when it shuffles itself back in, each consecutive time is going to be a little bit easier to find this card again. So, there's something to it there. But yeah, this is just a very strong ramp ability. And if you're running Cultivate, if you're running Kodama's Reach, you should probably run this card. Okay, so that's all that I wanted to talk about for these Omen Dragons, but I'll just say one more time. I think almost all of them are very strong just because of the nature of the Omen ability and how they've sort of balanced Omen being worse than Adventure by making the Omen cards very strong. And yeah, especially these ones, I'll just go back to this one quickly. These 2-color ones that are uncommon, there's a whole cycle of them. I think almost all of those are playable. So yeah. Okay, moving on from the Omen Dragons to Baator, Kin to All. This is the Abzan Spirit Dragon. There's a cycle of Spirit Dragons for each of these 3-color combinations in the set. This is the Abzan one, so it's 2 mana. Yeah, they're building a house. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear that, but we're just going to continue. It's 2 mana, a white, a black, and a green for a legendary Spirit Dragon. That is a 5/7 flyer, and it has 3 different triggered abilities. So it says, at the beginning of your end step, if creatures you control have total toughness 10 or greater, draw a card. Then if creatures you control have total toughness 20 or greater, untap each creature you control. And then if creatures you control have total toughness 40 or greater, each opponent loses half of their life rounded up. I've heard people criticize this card based on that last ability, saying, come on, like, it's a hard ask to have a board full of 40 total toughness on the board. So to have it just make your opponents lose half of their life feels kind of underwhelming for what you're actually accomplishing by having 40 toughness. I don't think that's the right way to evaluate this card. I think the correct way to evaluate this card is to look at that first ability and just assume you're just going to have that, because that alone makes this card extremely playable. It itself has 7 toughness, right? So all you need is one other creature on the board that has 3 toughness to achieve that second clause. And at that point, this is a card that is a 5 mana big flying dragon that draws you a card every turn, including the turn that it comes down. The fact that this is an end step trigger means it's going to draw you that card the first turn that you play it. So immediately you play this big dragon and then draw a card to replace itself, essentially, is really strong. It almost reminds me of a card called Blood Gift Demon, that is an older commander card. I don't think it sees a whole lot of play anymore, just with power creep being what it is. But people used to play Blood Gift Demon a lot. It was a 5 mana demon. I forget how big it was, but it was a 5 mana big black demon that at the beginning of your upkeep, you lost a life and drew a card. So this is just so much better than that in so many ways, but even just with the draw ability being that you get the card the turn that it comes down on your end step instead of your upkeep is amazing. That being said, the fact that it also untaps all of your stuff if you have a larger board is not nothing. I know people are kind of overlooking that ability, but one of the biggest deterrents from getting in for actual real combat damage in a game of Commander is that you don't want to leave yourself open to your 3 opponents. So the fact that this can circumvent that by being like, hey, you have a big board, get in there, I'll take care of it, and make sure we're back to block at the end of your turn, essentially, is very helpful. And then, yes, that 40 toughness clause at the end might be difficult to reach, but if you can get there, that means that you have a large board, and all of a sudden your opponents are at the most 20 life, unless they've been doing a lot of life gain. So they're very much within reach of just closing out the game with whatever power you have on the board. I'm slightly biased in mentioning this card because I definitely want to make this the new commander of my Slime Against Humanity deck that I did do a deck tech for. I'll link it up here if you're interested in checking that out. Currently, I'm using the commander as the Necro Bloom for like a combo kind of angle to the deck, but I think that this card is so sweet with Slime Against Humanity because that deck is great at just making gigantic ooze tokens that have a lot of toughness, and it's usually trying to win with combat damage. So the fact that this can just start having your opponent's life totals pretty easily, and then you can clean up the rest of the damage with ooze attacks, I think this will be a great option for that deck as well. But I'll stop talking about my personal decks. I think in general this card is good, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next pick here, which is Lotus Light Dancers. First of all, I don't love that this is just like some flowery hippie zombies that are like dancing in a sunny day, like next to a, I don't know, what is that, like a courtyard with flowers and stuff. Like, it feels very kind of lame to me. I definitely appreciated when Sultai was a little bit edgier. My friend was telling me that there's some reason in the lore as to why they've softened up in this set, and it kind of makes sense conceptually, but like I wish make hashtag make Sultai edgy again. But that being said, this card is really strong. This is 2 mana and Sultai for a total of 5 mana for a zombie bard, which is a 3/6 lifelink. But the important piece of this card is when it enters, search your library for a black card, a green card, and a blue card. Put those cards into your graveyard and then shuffle. That is just such a strong ability to be able to search any black card, any blue card, any green card. I've seen people compare this to Buried Alive, which is also a very strong card, and it only costs 3 mana. But Buried Alive only gets creatures. This can get Dread Return into your graveyard. Dread Return being a reanimator spell that has a flashback cost of sacrificing 3 creatures. So really, there are some crazy lines. This can put a Deep Analysis into your graveyard, which you can flashback for 2 mana to draw 3 cards. This can put, any of those Incarnations, Wonder, or Filth into your graveyard to give your creatures evasion if you need that. One line that I like the idea of with this card, if you're trying to go for like a more competitive combo angle, is if this enters and you grab a Protean Hulk and you grab a Dread Return and you grab a Narcomoeba. So the Narcomoeba, when it enters your graveyard, is just going to come straight onto the field as a 1/1 flying body. And then basically you're going to have this as a body, the Narcomoeba, and then you just need one other creature for a total of 3 to sacrifice all 3 of those to then flashback the Dread Return, bring Protean Hulk onto the battlefield, and then at that point, basically you just need a sacrifice outlet or a way to kill the Protean Hulk to start comboing off with your Protean Hulk lines. It's not like going to redefine the combo game in CEDH or anything like that, but I do think just having all of that on one card is very powerful. Like, people talk about 2-card combos being powerful. Potentially this card could be a 1-card combo. Yes, you do need, I guess, in that situation that I outlined, you do need a sacrifice outlet for the Protean Hulk if you don't have a way to kill it. And technically you need one other creature in addition to that Narcomoeba to sacrifice 3 creatures for the Dread Return. But really this does almost all the work entirely by itself. And that hypothetical situation that I described probably isn't even the best line with this card. That's just something that like immediately came to mind for me when I was thinking about stuff that you could do with it. There's probably other disgusting things you can do with it too. Maybe like some Necrotic Ooze line or something like that. But yeah, there's just a lot of potential here. And the longer that this card exists and new cards are printed that like to go into graveyards, the stronger this thing is going to get. I really like it because it almost feels like a puzzle that you can sort of play with and just try and figure out the best configurations of what you can actually do with this. So yeah, I dig this one. We're going to move on to a much simpler card. Sinkhole Surveyor is actually so simple that when I first looked at this, I was like, why is this rare? This doesn't even seem that good. However, the more that I looked at it and the more that I've thought about it, the more I've come around to thinking that this is actually a pretty strong card. It is a 2 mana, 1 and a black for a flying 1/3 bird scout. And whenever this creature attacks, you lose 1 life and this creature endures 1. Enduring 1 is a new ability, which means you either put a 1/1 counter on this creature or you create a 1/1 spirit token. So in like a non-commander formats, I think that like just getting this down for 2 mana, probably just standard is where this might be applicable, but like getting this down for 2 mana and then when it attacks, you can immediately put a 1/1 counter on it, so it essentially equates to a 2 mana 2/4 flyer is like pretty good rate, especially if you just get to keep it. Like, it's gonna be hard to kill with 4 toughness. And like if you can just keep attacking with it and keep accruing like more counters onto this thing, you can get like a lot of value for just 2 mana off of this card. Obviously, another very strong thing that you can do with this, and probably where it's going to be more applicable in Commander, is that you can make the 1/1 spirit token every turn when you attack with this also. In Commander, there's always going to be one opponent that you'll be able to make a safe attack with a flyer against, almost always. So you can basically always get in with this and then create a 1/1 token creature. And if you kind of squint at it, that's almost a Bitter Blossom. I won't go so far as to directly compare the two, because Bitter Blossom is an enchantment, so it's harder to remove, and it makes flying token creatures, which is very important. But yeah, if you're just like in a token strategy, if you're looking for fodder for like sacrifice stuff, or you're just trying to go wide, having a 2 mana thing that makes a 1/1 body every single turn is very effective. And like, yeah, you're paying a life every time, but also your opponents are losing life as you attack with this thing too. If you're in some kind of deck that cares about getting in for combat damage, even if it's only 1 damage per turn, if you're getting some kind of trigger whenever this connects, that's also going to be very helpful. So yeah, I just like a lot about this card. I like how efficient it is for just 2 mana, and that it can make you lots of tokens every turn. And then next on my list is Parination. Similar to the last card, this is actually one that I wasn't super excited about when I first saw it, but then the more that I thought about it, the more I came around to it. It's 3 mana and Abzan, so 6 total for a sorcery that says return target permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a hexproof counter and an indestructible counter on it. Um, so I think part of the issue that I first had when I looked at this card, and maybe something that's going to get a lot of other people too, is that 6 mana for a reanimation ability is very expensive. We have literal reanimate in Commander, which is a 1 mana reanimate ability. So my initial thought is like, why would I want to pay 6 mana for reanimate? Um, I think that's the wrong way of thinking about this. I think that this shouldn't. I guess I'll start by saying generally the philosophy of what you're trying to do with a reanimate is you're trying to cheat on mana, right? You're trying to dump a giant creature into your graveyard early on and then pay only 1 or 2 mana to bring it out onto the battlefield. Maybe it's a 6 mana thing that you then have only paid effectively 1 or 2 mana for. That is one aspect of what makes reanimation very strong. With this card, you're not really going to be saving a whole lot of mana. Even if you're reanimating like an 8 mana thing, you're still having to pay 6 mana for it, which doesn't, like, at that point, worth it doesn't really seem worth it because you're only saving 2 mana. However, the indestructible and hexproof counter that this brings the thing back with is actually huge. Um, yes, Farewell exists in this format. Yes, mass bounce effects like Cyclonic Rift exist in this format. Um, but if your opponent doesn't have exactly one of those, essentially, it is going to be so hard for them to deal with whatever you grab with this card. And another important distinction is that this can get any permanent. So yes, if you bring a creature back with this, it gets swept up by like a Sunfall or a farewell or like an edict ability like a Fleshbag Marauder or that kind of thing. But I do think that the edict argument isn't that great because it's going to be easy to have other creatures out that you can sacrifice instead. And then B, if you have a big enchantment in your graveyard that you're trying to, like, you want to god forbid you want to find an omniscience and put it onto the table with this, like, yeah, it still gets swept up by the Cyclonic Rift or the Farewell, but like Sunfall isn't hitting that. Black Sun Zenith, like we were talking about earlier, isn't gonna deal with that. Mutilate, Meat Hook Massacre, none of that. Like the minus abilities are gonna deal with you bringing an enchantment back with this card. So that's one piece of it that I really like. I think it's going to be very hard to remove, and yes, it's possible, but your opponents are basically just going to have to get lucky that they have the answer to whatever that you bring back with this. Um, and then there's the idea that somebody suggested to me that why don't you target a Platinum Angel or a Herald of there's a standard angel that is essentially also Platinum Angel with Flash, Herald of Eternal Dawn, I think, or something like that. But yeah, basically if you hit something that says you can't lose the game with this card, that is just such an exciting prospect to me. Again, it's not an unbreakable lock. There are going to be answers to it, but if your opponents don't have the exact, very specific answer that they need to find to that situation, you're essentially just invincible, and you can take all the time that you please to finish out the game at your leisure without worry that you're at a negative life total. Um, so yeah, I just think that and that's not even like scratching the surface of all the potential targets you can hit with this card. I just think there's a lot to do with it. So much so that I'm actually brewing a standard deck that does some fun graveyard stuff with this card and use that Herald of Eternal Dawn card too. Um, I know on this channel I generally do like a lot of commander material, but yeah, if anyone who's made it this far into the video is interested in seeing me blab about that Paranation standard deck that I have, I would be happy to do a video where I chat about it a little bit. But yeah, that being said, I just think this card has a lot of potential, and you shouldn't think about it as a mana cheating card so much as just like I'm getting this thing and I want to keep this thing. It is permanent, it is perennial, hence the card name. It is going to stay. And then next up we have Magmatic Hellkite, which is a 4-mana 4/5 flying dragon that says when this creature enters, destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. Its controller then searches their library for a basic land card and puts it onto the battlefield tapped with a stun counter on it. So yeah, like this isn't a wasteland. This isn't a sinkhole. This isn't like something that's just going to permanently blow up a land and put your opponent back on mana permanently. But the fact that it's just a very efficient flying body, 4-mana 4/5 that comes in and blows up your opponent's Cabal coffers, it blows up your opponent's Gaia's Cradle, it blows up their Maze of Ith, it blows up their Urza's Saga, it blows up their Glacial Chasm. There's always going to be some land that you need to deal with on your opponent's side of the board, so I'm always advocating for players to play more targeted land removal. Like, it's just an important piece of the format. I don't care what people say about like cultural game taboos and that kind of thing. Like, no, they're just trying to get away with Cabal coffers Urborg shenanigans, and they don't want you interrupting that. You absolutely have a right to deal with those kind of plays in Commander. So yeah, pack this card, try it out. I think it's pretty neat, especially the fact that it just comes on a sweet dragon. Next up, Mardu Siegebreaker. This is 1 and Mardu, so 4 mana for a Death Touch Haste Human Warrior that's a 4/4. And it says when this creature enters, exile up to one other target creature you control until this creature leaves the battlefield. And whenever this creature attacks, for each opponent, create a tapped token that's a copy of the exiled card attacking that opponent. And then at the beginning of your end step, you sacrifice those tokens. There's just so much that you can do with this card. First of all, just a 4-mana 4/4 Death Touch Haste is pretty good. Is a pretty good body. But then the fact that this comes in, and then you don't have to, but you may choose another creature that you control to essentially put underneath this that is essentially, it's an exile, but whenever this leaves the battlefield for any reason, you get the thing back. It comes back onto the table. And for as long as it is exiled with this thing, and when this thing attacks, you make 3 copies of that. And this has haste, so you can do that the turn that it comes down, which is kind of insane, honestly. So if you have another creature that just has a good enter the battlefield trigger, for 4 mana, you can play this thing, put it underneath the Siegebreaker, attack with Siegebreaker, make 3 copies of it that suddenly enter and are attacking, and are sacrificed. So even if you have something at the end of the turn, they're sacrificed, not exiled. So if you have something with death triggers that you want to take advantage of, this is great with that too. There's just so many lines where you can do gross stuff with this. And then, yeah, provided that it has a good enter the battlefield trigger, eventually when this thing does get removed, because your opponents are going to have to deal with it, you get the thing back, and not only you get the thing back, but it enters the battlefield again too. So you're just kind of going out of control with value with this card. I won't even like go down the line of all the broken creatures that you can put underneath this card, but just to sort of name one, like I would love to put a Grey Merchant of Asphodel under this card, attack with it, make three copies of Gary, and just kind of go to town with that. Like that'll win a game very quickly. So yeah, I like this card. Again, sort of like the Lotus Light Dancers. I like all of the puzzling that you can do surrounding it, and the different ideas that it's sort of like, it gets the gears turning in a way that I really appreciate, while also just being a very strong card. We're going to move on to, you're going to be like, what? But hear me out. Hear me out. This is Dragon Sniper. This is 1 green mana for a 1/1 human archer with vigilance, reach, and death touch. That's the whole card. But jeez Louise, you don't need anything beyond that. For 1 mana, you're getting a 1 mana 1/1 vigilance, reach, death touch. That is such a strong defensive presence on a commander table, especially the fact that it can come down on turn one. For one, your opponents aren't going to want to use removal resources getting rid of this thing unless they can do so easily by like pinging it with 1 damage, which will happen. But like, as long as this thing sticks, your opponents are not going to want to attack you with anything, because anything that this trades with, you are trading up in mana value advantage essentially. Like, even if your opponent just attacks you with a 2 mana creature that they played early on in the game and you chump with this but it kills and trades, you traded your 1 mana creature for your opponent's 2 mana creature. And so you're getting advantage in that way. But most of the time, what this is going to do on a commander table is just come down. Your opponents might like scoff at it or something, but then just not attack you for as long as this guy is here. It's like such a good, just defensive piece that's so efficient. I am kind of just blown away by the amount of value that you're getting for 1 mana with this card. So yeah, like, people are like, oh, in limited it'll be great. Yeah, on a commander table it'll be especially great, because in 1v1 formats, your opponent is more incentivized to sort of have to remove this thing so they can start pushing damage through. In a 4-player format, oftentimes what this is going to do for just the measly cost of 1 mana is just have your opponent stop looking over at you until this gets caught up in a sweeper or something. But until that happens, they're just going to be like, I guess I'll attack over here instead. That's exactly what you want to be happening on a commander table, is for your opponents to be attacking amongst each other and sort of leaving you alone under the guise of like, well, they're not that much of a threat. They just have this measly 1/1 human on the table. So yeah, I just think that it does so much for you while being unsuspecting. This is a very cool card. Just got a couple more here. So the next one is Rot Cursed Rakshasa, I think is how you say that. This might be my favorite card in the set. This card, when I saw this card, I was just like kind of blown away by how cool it is. I don't think it's necessarily the most powerful card in the set, but like, also this is very powerful. It is a 2 mana demon that is a 5/5 trample. It has Decayed, which is a returning ability that says this creature can't block, and then whenever it attacks, you sacrifice it at the end of combat, importantly. So it does still get to deal its combat damage before you sacrifice it. And then it has a Renew ability, which says 2 black and X, and you can exile this card from your graveyard to put a Decayed counter on each of X target creatures, and then activate only as a sorcery. There's so much that I like about this card. I like that this is a low mana cost demon, so it goes really great with your Unholy Annex, which, as I said in my Duskmourn top 10 cards video, was one of my favorite cards from that set, and I do think that that card should go in pretty much every commander deck. So this plays great with that. But that's kind of the least exciting thing about this card. This is a 2 mana 5/5 trample. In Commander, maybe that's not going to be always as relevant because everyone has 40 life total. In Standard, and maybe even other older formats, like, this takes a quarter of your opponent's life total for 2 mana. And like, what are they gonna, like, they're gonna block it? Okay, some is still probably going to trample over. And if they block with the intent of trying to kill this thing, like, what's the point? It's gonna die anyways. I think oftentimes when you attack an opponent with this, they're just gonna like sigh and take 5 damage. But then obviously after that, the fact that you can then renew this from your graveyard to put Decayed counters onto your opponent's creatures, essentially making it so that they can't block, and then they get 1 more attack. But once they've attacked that last time with a Decayed counter on it, they have to be sacrificed. So it's almost like removal. It's like making them super impotent for whatever creatures you're trying to remove on the table, only restricted by how much mana you have because it's an X cost thing. So yeah, there's just so much that I like about this card. In Commander, again, if you're in a deck that can like double combat damage, or is trying to be super hyper aggro, or cares about getting through for combat damage because there's triggers, like yeah, the body's exciting in that regard too. Uh, but just that renewability, like I was saying earlier with the Lotus Light Dancers, like go grab this off of the Lotus Light Dancers. I like to run Vile Entomber, which is a 4 mana 2/2 zombie. It's black, and when it enters, you can search your deck for any card and put it into your graveyard. I run that in almost every deck that I can run it in, because it's just a great toolbox kind of ability to have. And so I like to look for pieces like this that's like, okay, or if you're just running Entomb, which is just 1 mana, put a card into your graveyard from your deck. Like having a diverse set of cards that you can go for with those kind of Entomb abilities is really nice. Sometimes you want to get the reanimation piece to put into your graveyard because you have reanimate in your hand or whatever, and then that's great to do with your Entomb. Sometimes you're trying to push damage through and you put Filth or Wonder into your graveyard. Um, and then sometimes you're just trying to remove your opponent's creatures or push damage through, because this does both of those things. And so you can just go find this, put it into your graveyard, use that renewability, and basically just make all of your opponent's creatures rot is what this is actually doing. So um, yeah, this is a sweet puzzle piece for the Entomb packages. It's sweet on its own, just being a gigantic 2 mana 5/5. It has a cool creature ability that matters in some scenarios. And yeah, all around, I think this will probably see some standard play, but in Commander, I'm definitely going to be jamming this in any deck that has some kind of like Entomb package, which is most of my Commander decks because I like to build decks that way. And then for the final card of my list, we have Ureni, the Song Unending. This is another one of the Spirit Dragons, and I guess here I'll just take a moment to say that like all of the Spirit Dragons in the set, like the main set, are very cool, and I almost wanted to put a spot for all of them on this list, but decided not to, just so I could have more cards to be able to talk about. But I do love all of the Spirit Dragons. Um, this one is especially kind of amazing because it is 5 mana in Teamer, so it's 8 mana, a lot of mana for a legendary Spirit Dragon. But this thing is a 10/10 with flying and protection from white and black. Um, but that's not it. When this enters, it deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers your opponents control, where X is the number of lands that you control. And spoiler alert, if you're casting, yeah, obviously there are ways to cheat this out, but if you're casting an 8 mana creature, you probably have a lot of lands, meaning that X is going to be a pretty high number, and you're going to be able to pick off at least a few of your opponent's biggest threats just when this thing enters the battlefield. But then once this thing is on the battlefield, the fact that it's a 10/10 flyer with protection from white and black makes it all but unblockable and all but removable. Like it all rather all but unremovable, because like most of the removal that you see in a game of Commander, most of the targeted removal is going to be white or black. If you've played against an Animar deck before, you know very well how hard it is to kill Animar, so we have almost a direct comparison of just how strong protection from white and black is. You're not going to be Swords to Plowsharesing this card, you're not going to be Path to Exiling, you're not going to be Deadly Rollicking, you're not going to be Tragic Slipping, you're not going to be Go for the Throating this creature. It's just going to dodge all of those. Yeah, it dies to a sweeper. But even if it does die to a sweeper, it came down and wreaked havoc against your opponent's boards too. And like, even if you just get one turn of attacking with this thing after blowing up a bunch of your opponent's stuff, like that's the other thing too, right? Is you're already getting so much value off of this just entering the battlefield. Even if it immediately dies, which is going to be hard to happen, but if it does happen, worst case scenario, it took a bunch of your opponent's stuff with it. But like best case scenario, you get to start attacking with this thing and it's just going to kill your opponents. Like 10 damage, that's a quarter of their life total. And um if this is in the command zone, which I think this makes a mean commander, like very powerful commander option, because you can just build a deck that ramps until you get to play this thing, and then you play this thing, and it's going to ruin your opponent's boards and just kill them with commander damage so quickly. All you need to do is get one extra point of power on this guy, and it's two-shotting people. All you need to do is get one extra point of power on this guy and give it double strike, and it's one-shotting people. Like, it is so easy to kill with commander damage with this card, and the fact that it has protection built into it means that, like, this is a very real Voltron option for commander players that like to go in that direction. That's definitely like a preferred strategy for me, so maybe I'm feeling a little biased, but I think this makes a great Voltron option if you're trying to build a deck along those lines. Just jam ramp, jam some double strike abilities, and you're gonna go crazy with this card. So yeah, I think this is very strong in the command zone, and also just a incredibly strong creature, period. If you have ways to reanimate it or cheat it out or just get this thing onto the table early, like, it's going to do work for you. So yeah, that is the end of my list. Thank you all so much for sticking around to the end of the video. It really means a lot. I appreciate it. Cheers to you. And yeah, I'm just kind of curious to hear what your thoughts are about my picks, where there's some cards on here that you disagree with, but then also B, what your favorite picks from this set are, what cards you're excited to play with in your commander decks or in your standard decks or whatever. Leave some comments below. We get a plane bidding you farewell, so with that, I'll just go ahead and say have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can be tuned in for the next videos that I release. All right, thanks.